So as I said in the previous episode, what we were doing up till now is not the preferred method of doing things in Svelte and Sapper, at least when fetching the posts or fetching the data from your server is concerned. So in this episode we are going to refactor that a little bit and make it better and make it server-side renderable. Before we get into refactoring our code, I gave you a homework assignment in the previous episode, and that assignment was what we want to do right here is when we click on the certain article, we also want to get the category of that article in this URL. So how do we do that? And I also promised you that I will answer that question and show you how to do it in this episode. So let's just quickly go through it. So to do this, first of all, you need to go to your routes and go to articles, and then here you would create a directory called category. Actually, square braces, category, square brace. Okay, so this is going to be our catch-all, and then I'm going to put the slug.svelte into that category directory. Right? Okay. So the next thing we need to do in our post list here, where we are fetching the post, we need to do some changes. But before that, let me just show you how this works, right? This route structure right here. So if I go to my browser and go to something like, as you can see, now we already are getting 404 not found because we changed the routes. But if I go to articles, movies, and then hello world, now this will work. As you can see, we have category in our URL. So to do that, we need to change the links inside of our post list. Okay, so we need to get the slug of the category, and as you already know, that is kind of complicated because WordPress doesn't just give you the slug. So if we check out our API right here, and we go to posts, what you will get, you will only get the category ID, and we don't want that. We don't want to access it through ID. So what we can do right here is actually we can add here in on mount, we can just add and underscore embed, right? And when you do that, you will get something from it, and that is if you do embed. Now look at this, you will get the embedded data in your posts, and it's right down here. So you would get the author, you would get featured media, and you would also get this WP term, and then you would get this array with the ID of 2 and the slug of books in this case. This is not the preferred method or how I would do it for a live site. As I said in the previous video, I would actually create custom endpoint for this, because to access this is just going to look a little bit weird, and I'm going to show it how it's going to look right now. So if I go to my code editor and go to our links, so we need the category right here, right? So what you can do to access that category is something like this. So post.embed, then WP term, then 0, then .slug. Kind of looks ridiculous, but it works. So if I save this, go right here and go to my home page, now all of our links will have categories in them, right? As you can see, books, and then this. Hello world gets the movies, and so on. So this works. To make it just a little bit prettier, what you can do is create a function. Let's just create a function right here, call it get category slug, and the get category slug is going to accept post in it, and then you just want to return post, embed, and so on. This is going to look just a little bit prettier on your link right here. So you can do get category post, actually not get category slug, and pass the post to it. So if we save this, check out our browser, this also works, right? We get the category of comics right here, movies right here, and so on. As I said, this is not the preferred method or how I would do it for live site. I would create custom endpoint for my posts, and in that custom endpoint I would actually have easily accessible slug of the category that the post belongs to. But if you're working with just vanilla WordPress's REST API, then you can do it this way. Okay, so let's now get into the actual topic of this video, and that is going to be the refactoring of what we did before, what we did up until now. And the idea for this actually came from this post right here on Stack Overflow while I was preparing for the previous episode. This is actually from Rich Harris, right? The guy asked a question. J Column asked some question, and it was a similar question to what I had and what we had to deal in the previous episode with our categories. And now the Rich Harris, so the guy that actually created Svelte and Sapper, says there are two options. The first and most idiomatic and correct in your situation, since it sounds like you want to use server-side rendering, which we want to use in our application, was to do something like this. We will go through this in this episode, so I'm not going to explain this code to you. And then the preload function will run before the component is created, supplying with year data prop and so on. And because this works on the server as well as on the client, so this method works on both server and the client, and we are actually urged to use it. But if you don't want to use that, you can use the method that we used in the previous video. And Rich Harris said that this is only for the sake of completeness. So this would not actually be the preferred way to do this, because what we want to do is when somebody hits our URL or our route, we actually want to preload the data and then send that data to our components. And also we want to make those components as dumb as possible, right? So we just want to use them to display the data, and we want to send the data to the component from our page. And this is what we are going to be doing in this episode. And by the way, if you have questions about Svelte and Sapper, please don't ask them in my videos, because I'm kind of a newbie, just like you are. But also because if you go to Stack Overflow right now, while Svelte is still fresh and doesn't have many users, there is a very high probability that the actual creator of the framework is going to answer your question, just like he did here. And this is not the only post where Rich answers the question, so please ask them there. Not just because he's going to answer those questions, but also by doing that you are building a database of knowledge about Svelte and Sapper and questions and problems you ran into and the solution to those problems. So I urge you to actually ask your questions at Stack Overflow and not on my video. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to go into my post list and mostly comment out everything. Because we just don't want to deal with all of the errors that we are going to be getting before everything is done. So also in the script tag, I'm just going to comment out everything. And I'm just going to leave the styling right here, because that we are not going to be changing. Okay, so now we go into index.svelte. So this is our front page, and on that front page we first of all want to preload all the data and then pass it to our post list. So how do we do that? Well, we actually did something similar when we created. So if we go to routes, articles, category, slug.svelte, as you can see, we are preloading that data right here on our articles. So this is the correct way to do it. So I'm just going to copy this and go to my index.svelte file and then just paste this in here. We have the access to our API URL. The only thing that we need to change here is the actual fetch URL. So I'm just going to go to my post list, and we are fetching this in onMount function. So we need to actually fetch some posts. So I'm going to copy this out and just paste it right here. Right? So first of all, we just want to display the posts. Then we are getting this response. I'm not going to call this data, I'm actually going to call this posts. And you can think of this as kind of a state like you would have in Vue or React, and just in our index page. So what I'm going to do here, instead of post, I'm going to send in posts. This is actually equivalent to posts equal posts. But we don't want to write it that way. We are just going to say posts. Okay, so we are sending them. Then we have to define them right here. Okay, and now we want to add those, we want to pass those posts as props to our post list. And to do that, you would just do posts equal posts. Now we are passing them to our posts list. Great. Save this. Now we can go to our posts list, and in here we are also need to define those posts. So also export let posts. Okay, great. Now we have the posts in our post list. So all of this right here we just replaced with the code in our index, and as you will see at the end of this episode, we will actually end up with less code than before. So if we save this right here, of course nothing is going to happen because, and let us just see if we are getting some errors. No, because we still didn't display those posts right here. So I'm going to go right here, uncomment this, and as you can see we will get an error because we don't have get category slug function. So we can just copy out that function from our commented code. Where is it that we just created? So get category slug, just copy that out, put it here. Okay, now we have that function, and actually this should work. So if we save this, go to our page, as you can see, we are getting all of our posts right now. And let's just go through this one more time. So on our index page, we are getting the actual posts. We are sending them as props to our post list, and then we are just displaying them on our post list. And this is what is called a DOM component. So this component actually does nothing except for this little function right here to just return the slug of our category, and that's about it. So this is all the actual logic for that component. Everything else is done in index.svelte, and we are passing that down to our component, and that is the way that we are getting the data. Of course, the major advantage with this is that this is going to be server-side renderable, which we actually want. So when we put our page to the actual server online, this is going to be much more performant, it's going to be better for SEO and so on. So this is the preferred method of doing things. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do, we got our posts, of course we need to handle pagination somehow. And as you will see, it is not that difficult once you understand this concept. Okay, so first of all, we need to get the total number of pages that we want to display. And we already, of course, did that, so we can just go to our commented code and just copy this out. So total pages is going to be this. We have our response right here, so this is going to be a const. We have our response right here, and we are just getting the headers and total pages. Next thing we need to do, we need to create that array of pages that we can iterate through, like here, to get the page 1, 2, 3. So this is just going to be an array with 1, 2, 3 in it. We did that while we were doing the episode on pagination, and we actually have that function right here. It's called create pages array. So we can just copy that function and put it in our index file below our API URL. So we have this, and then to get all of the pages, we can just do const pages. Actually, to get the number of pages, an array of pages, we can just do create pages array, and then we pass in total pages in it. Okay. Of course, now we have to define them right here. So pages, and we want to define them here also. Just go to copy this. So pages, and then we want to send that pages array to our post list. So pages is going to be pages. Okay, save this. And also we want to define that prop here. Great. Now that we did that, we are going to uncomment this pagination. We are going to change this button into our A tag, and I'm going to explain why in just a second. Next thing we want to do, so you see we have this current page right here. It's going to define is our page active or not. So it's going to define if that button is active or not. So what we need to do, since this is an index page, we can actually hard code this. We need to define one more prop, and that prop is going to be called current page, and it's going to be 1. And we want to pass that current page also here. Page equals current page. Of course, we need to define it, and we need to define it right here. Okay, so now this is going to work. And next thing we need to do, so before we had this button, and on click we would actually run something like this. So this function change page. We are not going to do it that way in this refactoring. So I'm going to actually delete this. And just to see if all of this works for now, let's just save it and check out our page. Okay, so now we get 1, 2, 3. Great. Of course, none of this works. We still haven't set up our URLs for those pages, and we are going to be doing that right now. So what we want to have for this pagination, and we want to make it work differently than before. We don't want to have that function that is going to fetch our posts. We actually want to do something like when you're here on the home page, you would actually go to page and then 1 or 2 or 3. So this is going to be our pagination, and this is the way the most paginations actually work live on the internet. So to do that, of course, we would need a route for that pagination. And to do that, we just go to our code editor, and then we want to create directory and a file. So the directory is going to be called page, and the file is going to be called square bracket number, square bracket, and then svelte. Okay. So this is going to be our route. Now, of course, that route is going to be identical, almost identical to our index.svelte file. So I'm just going to paste this in, make it bigger. And we are, of course, going to need to make some changes. First of all, since this route is deeper in our directory structure, we need to add this so that we can get our components. And when you access that route, you get access to these params right here. So I'm going to try to log them out right here, but sometimes this doesn't work, sometimes it does. This is probably because this is an asynchronous function. If it doesn't, then we are going to display it here. So let me just try it out. So params.log. Let's try to log it out. So now if we go to our browser and go to page, is going to be 2. Nothing happens. Okay, so we need to console it right here. So I'm just going to send the params and then define them. And now I'm going to just log them out. just so you can see what we are actually getting in the params. Okay, so if we go right here, and in params you would just get this number is 2. Okay, so now that we have access to the number, we pretty much know what we need to do. So we need first of all to change this right here to be page is going to be params dot number, right? So we want to get the page number 2 from our URL, and then we want to set the current page instead of being 1. Of course, on our index page we can hard code it because it's always going to be the first page, but in this case it's going to be page params dot number. Okay, and save this. Now if we go right here, as you can see, those posts have changed, and if I go to number 3, I will get a different posts. If I go to number 1, I would get different posts. Okay, so now we have this set up. Now we can just add links to these buttons right here. So if I go to post list, we would do href is going to be page and then the number of that page which we are getting from this. So page, and that is it. Also, styling is made for a button, and we currently have an A tag right there, so I'm just going to add this here instead of button and just do display inline block. Okay, save this, check it out. Okay, so now if I go, okay, this page 1, so this page 2, as you can see, our posts are changing, but we are not getting the active link, and this is because from our parameters, as you can see right here, from our parameters we are actually getting a string, not a number. So to correct that, in our number.svelte, instead of sending current page params number, we're just going to add a plus right here, and in JavaScript that means that it's just going to transform this string into a number. And if we save this right now and go to our page, this should work, right? So we are on page 1, page 2, page 3. Great. And we also have this route changes in our URL bar, which is also great. Okay, so now let's handle this category list right here. So we are probably going to have this category list on almost every one of our pages. So how are we going to handle that? Well, first of all, I'm just going to go to my code editor, and since I'm going to have this on every page, I don't want to have it in index.svelte or number.svelte. So I'm going to go right here and actually remove that category list and just leave the posts list. Okay, on our index.svelte file. And also you can remove it from here. Save it. Then also on our number.svelte file, we are also going to remove that category list. Save it. And remove it from here. Great. So now on both of those pages we just have this posts list. And also I'm going to remove this styling because we are not going to be needing that, and the styling from here. Okay, we are not going to be needing that. So on index and number pages we only get these two, just this one component in which we are passing our data. Okay, so now what we want to do, since this category list is going to appear on all of our pages, we actually want to define it in our layout file. So I'm going to open layout.svelte file, make it a little bit bigger, and in it you can do the same thing as in index and so on. So this is going to be then called just once, not every time you change your route. You're not going to be fetching those categories which happened before. So instead of that, we are going to define context module once again, of course define our URL, preload it, and then we are just going to get our categories and return them right here. So we are going to import that category list and we want to display it somewhere here. But before we do that, and to not get many errors, we are going to open that file. And in here, of course, we need to remove all of this. We don't need that because we are going to be passing the categories into our component. So we are just going to define them as categories. We are going to be expecting that data, and nothing needs to change this at all, here at all. And now we want to define export let categories. Okay, and what we want to do next is just change this markup here a little bit. So we want to put this to be in another class called content. Actually, in another div. Okay, and now here we want to display our categories. Category list. Of course, we need to pass those categories into our component. Okay, and I think that should be it. Save this, go to our browser, and as you can see, we are getting those categories right here. And our pagination works, and this is going to work on all of our pages. Only thing is that those categories are not beside our posts, and to fix that we can just go to layout.svelte, and in its CSS I'm just going to do display flex right here. Okay, so now we got what we had before. For your homework, try to make these categories work, because of course right now they don't work, and using the principles that you learned in this video, you should be able to get this working. Of course, at the beginning of the next episode, I'm just going to show you how that all would work, and I'm going to put it on GitHub so you would have access to that code. Before I go, I just want to stress something out. This still isn't the optimal way of doing things. Actually, it is a good way of doing things, but our code can be a little bit tighter, a little bit drier. So we are probably going to have one more episode about refactoring, not right now, maybe at the end of the series, because we have things like this API URL, so we can probably put that in some sort of helper. This code is also would reappear on a lot of pages, so we can also put that in some sort of helper. Maybe we can get the API URL to be somehow globally available, and so on. So we want to make this code a little bit drier, but as I said, we are going to do that in one of the future episodes, not right now, not in the next one. So just to make this and just a little bit more dry. Okay, so this has been it for this episode. Remember, everything we did here will be available for you on GitHub. The link will be in the description below. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.